particularly with some of the statements made. So we all hear over and over again that South Asian region is the fastest growing region in the world, and the projections seem very positive, although that's not a great story for Sri Lanka, which is projected to be this year growing less than 4% and really not very optimistic in the coming years as well. But what I would like to ask is, are we on a sustainable growth path? We've had a lot of boom and bust cycles, we've had a bumpy road in terms of growth in this region. So I will start with Professor Raihan. Especially Bangladesh is among the top growth stories in the region. And I would like to ask your view. Do you feel Bangladesh and rest of South Asia is on a sustainable growth path like the East Asians, where they had consistently high growth rates over a longer period of time, for instance, that generated the high levels of income and prosperity for the region?
Thank you. I think question is, of course, it's very important, and I definitely refer to the World Bank's publication on South Asia World Focus. I think it's very important area. They looked at the kind of macroeconomic challenges of these countries. But your question of the economic growth, whether we are able to sustain it, as you have rightly mentioned, the countries have different experiences in South Asia. Countries like Bangladesh, probably over the last 2 decades, has been able to continue and accelerate growth, but other countries have kind of different experiences. But for me, I think the biggest challenge is for Bangladesh, country like Bangladesh, is that to find the drivers of growth on a sustainable basis. So it's not just simply you continue growth the way the economy is moving, the way it is happening over the last 2 decades. Especially riding on the garments export, riding on remittance. These 2 major factors have been very contributing to Bangladesh's economic growth. But I think the kind of contribution of this growth, or what I say, that the dividends of these growth drivers are diminishing. So unless and until you find a new set of drivers, especially as you rightly mentioned about East Asia and Southeast Asian economy, the way they moved into higher growth path, and they got themselves integrated with the global value chain and the regional value chain, with accelerated FDI in that region. I think still we are seriously lagging behind. So that is something, when you mention about sustained economic growth, first point I really like to mention and like to flag out whether we are getting the drivers of growth. But I think the major challenge of sustaining growth is that to ensure that the growth is a quality growth. It's not just a number, especially whether it is ensuring job, or I'm really grateful that, I'm glad that the honorable speakers have talked about job creation, and also whether it is addressing inequality. To my understanding, we are not really achieving those targets. I think it's a kind of common feature for most of these South Asian countries, that we are having high growth numbers in certain periods, or some countries, for example, Bangladesh, are able to continue it, and we're translating these growth numbers to job creation, and especially inequality reduction. We have not been that successful.
Thank you very much. So that brings me to the next question, especially in terms of public expenditure and fiscal deficits. So like Professor Raihan said, to accelerate growth and address some of the create new growth drivers, you need also, there's a huge role for public expenditure to play in terms of investing in education, health and infrastructure, 3 key drivers this region is lagging far behind. But at the same time, you have this huge, enormous problem of not having enough revenue. So you really have huge, enormous needs to drive your growth, but at the same time, every country in this region suffers from revenue. And I read in the Economic Focus report that Nepal has been exceptionally successful in increasing at least debt to GDP ratio in terms of tax revenue. and yes, from 8 to 20% in about 2 decades. So I would really like to learn from the experience of Nepal, because in Sri Lanka we are struggling for so many years to actually increase our revenue.
Martin's analysis actually. I was going through the YouTube where you have made a lot of presentations, interesting. The point is, initially let me also begin with the sustainability. Because if you look at the history for the last couple of years with regards to growth, it's being established because it has increased for 5 consecutive quarters already. There are some macroeconomic aggregates that needs to be taken into consideration. Inflation has been for the last several years less than the target, but the point is it's increasing. That's a point that should be taken into consideration. And then the budget deficit is so huge. You know, the annual shortfalls between government spending and tax revenue. In Nepal's case, basically this problem has arisen because of the parallel institutions created. We have a National Planning Commission at the center that estimates growth. We have the central bank. It is mandated to contain inflation. And we have Ministry of Finance, which makes allocation of resources. If you cannot establish linkages between these 3 different institutions, it will be extremely difficult to find out what amount of budgetary expenses being flown into the economy. So, with regards to monetary policy, it has been highly successful in a way. But the fiscal responsibility, because of the political pressures, because of the huge externality, this is out of the control. So these are the macroeconomic aggregates which should be given due consideration. In Nepal's case, we said from 8 to 20% of the GDP. Let's see again if this is going to be a stable sort of feature in future.
So what actually made the difference? What were the reforms that Nepal government
Massive revenue
introduced?
collection at the local level.
So
Because we are mentally prepared to go for federal states. This exercise has been done since last at least 5 years. So behind the scene was the IMF, behind the scene was the World Bank, of course, and this really worked. But now we are more hopeful in the sense like, I'm just bothered about the denomination of the political inclination of the government, What I'm concerned is the government is stable. It has a 2/3 majority. There is a trust like this government will do something. So this will contribute to this regular growth. I trust you.
Thank you. So I'll turn to Dr. Rao. Just to understand, since you've been working in the region for a long time, and especially when you mentioned the success of the Latin America in terms of creating regional integration, in South Asia, I'm sure we have several decades of experience in research and forums, discussions on South Asia, where you feel like you're hearing the same story over and over again. Is there anything different that we should do, because we've done this research, we know the problems, we know the solutions, but in the absence of political will, what can the South Asians do? Do you have any answers?
I think that's really a difficult question. Let me start by saying that I will not claim that Latin America was very successful in regional integration. My point was that in terms of sharing experience and having a common vision, I think a lot has been built. But I will not necessarily put Latin America as a very successful region in terms of regional integration. But I think your question is absolutely right. I think we tend to know, quote unquote, what it takes to have good growth. It takes investments in human capital, it takes infrastructure, it takes competition in markets. So in a way we know, and the question you pose is why is that doesn't happen? or what is that in South Asia is getting on the way. And I would say there are, my impression, first, I remain a South Asia optimist, and an Asia optimist in general, but a South Asia optimist. I think that the next few decades, South Asia will be to the world what East Asia was before. But South Asia has challenges that in a way are a bit stronger. I think one of the challenges has to do with the role of politics in policy making. I think some of the problems we see, like low tax revenue, protectionist measures, are very much related to the still considerable importance of interest groups and vested interests. Ideally, we will know how to deal with that by finding policies where there are no losers, that are Pareto optimal, but that's quite difficult to implement. And so if I think of a country like Sri Lanka, one will wonder, why is that, again, as the governor said, why is that Sri Lanka has not made it to the point where it has a free trade agreement with China, it has a free trade agreement with India, and with its superior location, it just has spectacular growth. What is getting on the way of that? What is getting on the way of most of the countries in the region having such low tax revenue? Of course, that means there are groups that manage to avoid and evade and to get tax exemptions of different sorts on the pretense of protecting from unfair competition or other reasons. So again, that part of interest groups, I think, is strong and is important. Technological innovations sometimes allow countries to go over them. Like every country, every city has had some restrictive regulation on taxes, and then one day you have the Ubers and the Olas coming and you get the competition going without needing the reform. But in other areas it is more difficult. So I would say a first thing is getting to these more optimal policies where there are interest groups that are opposing, how to build the coalitions, the majorities, the consensus on what needs to be done. I think there are other constraints that are more institutional. When you compare East Asia and South Asia,